time depth of approximately 2,000 to 3,000 years. By 1609, Henry Hudson sailed into the Raritan and Delaware Bays, and Europeans began exploring the coastal inlets and bays. The whaling industry began to take hold in 1650, resulting in the earliest settlements of the South Jersey coast. In the final nod to the original inhabitants of the Pinelands, we turn our attention to Chemung Township. In August of 1758, the first Native American reservation in the colonies, and the only one recognized in the state of New Jersey, was established at what is now known as Indian Mills. The reservation was established on what was known then as the Edge-Pillock Tract and encompassed approximately 3,000 acres. The reservation was administered by John Brainerd, and a sawmill and workers' quarter were established near Bread and Cheese Run. After Brainerd's death in 1781, the reservation quickly slipped into decline, and its inhabitants experienced increased friction with their white neighbors who looked down on them and coveted their land. By 1802, the majority of the reservation inhabitants had emigrated north to Oneida, New York, at the invitation of the Mohican tribe, or Mohican. It's either Mohican or Mohican. And the reservation lands were resurveyed, divided into lots, and sold. Residents of the Pinelands have long made use of the region's abundant resources to survive and thrive. This includes a rich history in the shipbuilding industry, which began on the periphery of the Pinelands in 1688. Towns such as Dennisville became prosperous in the 19th century as a result of their advantageous port location and the multiple auxiliary industries that formed around the primary shipbuilding operations. The Pinelands forest yielded huge quantities of white cedar that shipbuilders used for boat planks. The region Oaks Creek were used for other boat parts, including ribs and beams. Boats are still being built in the Pinelands today. Some of the earliest settlements in the Pinelands began to emerge around sawmills and grist mills in the 1700s. Sawmills were among the earliest and most durable sites of historic settlement in the Pine Barrens. There are over 150 identified sawmill sites within the Pinelands alone, and their ubiquitous nature indicates their importance to settlement and early industry in the region, particularly for shipbuilding and iron production. Small villages sprang up around these sawmills, boatyards, and lumbervilles. These villages would become communities such as Brown Mills, Tuckahoe, Port Elizabeth, and Batstow. Anybody ever see this? Regions have their own folklore, and in the Pinelands we have tales of a grotesque beast known as the Jersey Devil. Here's how one of the stories go. On a dark and stormy night in 1735, Mother Leeds of Leeds Point, Galloway Township, was giving birth to her 13th child. She was distraught after having 12 kids of having another kid, and she made a statement, "Let this baby be the devil." The baby was said to be born with the head of a horse, wings of a bat, forked tail, and cloven hooves. Sightings of the monsters have been reported all over South Jersey, including Hamilton. Policemen, politicians, businessmen, well-to-do people, up and down the expressway, the parkway. There's been some really important documentation that they've seen this. But here's a real interesting part that one of the Pinelands staff gave me, and I didn't realize this. In recent years, there have been multiple scholarly attempts to ground the story of the Jersey Devil into historic fact. One of these attempts is of particular interest. Leeds Point is named after Daniel Leeds, originally a Quaker who arrived in Burlington with some degree of cachet in the late 17th century, and who quickly rose to prominence as Surveyor General and as a successful landowner. Leeds was quite a character, to say the least. He professed a belief in the efficacy of astrology and other occult phenomena that had the Quakers shaking their head. He published an almanac and several books on mythicism that put him at odds with the Philadelphia meeting. The Philadelphia meeting was the congregation of the Quakers from Philadelphia. So I guess that was the prominent congregation at that time. This led to Daniel vocally renouncing the Quakers and they him, an attitude which eventually rubbed off on his son Titan, who continued his father's complaints against him. When Titan took over the publication of his father's almanac in the early 1700s, he reconfigured the masthead to include the Leeds family crest, which included a dragon on it. Can you see where this is headed? To amplify matters, Titan got into a feud with Ben Franklin, and over and through their competing almanacs. And Franklin, tongue-in-cheek, frequently referred to Titan Leeds tirades as so horrible that they must have been uttered by a creature from the spirit world. All this happened right around the time that Leeds Point Monster, the Jersey Devil, was reported to have been born. And so there's certainly the chance that the Jersey Devil narrative was born of tensions between the Leeds, the powerful Philadelphia meeting, and the influential sharp wit of Franklin, providing a template for the story as it has come today. Pineland residents not only used the abundant forest to build ships, they also harvested tens of thousands of acres to make charcoal. Charcoal was primarily used to fuel the furnaces that produced bog iron. The making of charcoal was a surprisingly sensitive process, and a class of workers called colliers developed to provide it. Charcoal kilns were usually 20 to 40 feet in diameter and began with a guide pole stuck in the ground at the center of the kiln. Cords of wood were stacked around the center pole and then covered with turf or earth. The tricky part was regulating the flow of air to the wood as it burned inside the earthen mound. The collier's job was to ensure that the wood charred at a consistent rate for several days and did not burst into open flames, which might ruin the batch. The collier had to be extremely watchful of the kiln while preparing a batch. And the remains of the collier huts are frequently found in association with the remains of the kilns. A typical yield for a burning was around 7,000 to 18,000 pounds of charcoal per pit. The remains of these kilns are found throughout the Pinelands today. The Pinelands was once home to a thriving bog iron industry. Bog iron was created from ferric oxides that occurred in the iron-rich clays that underlie much of New Jersey's outer coastal plain. Waters laden with organic acids from decaying vegetation percolate down to these layers, leaching out to the soluble iron and carrying it to the surface. The iron ore was deposited along the banks and in the swamps, where it was mined and smelted for a full century from 1760 to 1860. Early furnaces and forges such as Batstow and Atzine played a role in supplying the materials needed for the Revolutionary War, and thus have become an integral part of the story of our fight for independence. Production at Batstow was deemed such a thorn in the British side that an attempt was made in 1778 not only to wipe out privateers along the Mullica River who regularly captured or harassed British supply ships, but to continue upstream and destroy the furnace for good. The British succeeded in wiping out a rebel fort and stores at Chestnut Neck, but were unable to get upriver to Batstow after learning of the advance of a superior force on the way led by Count Casimir Pulaski. On their way seaward, the British ambushed and assassinated a group of Pulaski's advanced troops on Osborne Island, an event that became known as the Little Egg Harbor Massacre. Atzine Forge was established in 1766 and for several years processed much of the pig iron produced at Batstow. Atzine was eventually sold to Lawrence Salter and Henry Drinker, who built a furnace there in 1774 to diminish their reliance on Batstow. Because Drinker was a Quaker, and ostensibly a pacifist, he shut down the furnace in protest during the time of the Revolutionary War. Salter, however, owned controlling interest of the forge and had no problem remaining a significant supplier of iron product to the flourishing Continental Navy. Glassmaking has been a viable industry in New Jersey since Caspar Worcester established a small glass house in Salem County in 1739. The abundance of pure sand and fuel ensured the early development of the industry. In the Pinelands, early productions like Union glasswork arose in relatively undeveloped areas such as Port Elizabeth. The failure of the work in 1818 was probably assisted by the lack of railroad support for finished goods. The Estival glasswork, that's pictured here, was established in the mid-1830s and was advantageously located close to water transport. For many years, they were known for the production of hollowware and window glass. The Batstow glasswork holds the distinction of being the only Pinelands glasswork to have been archaeologically investigated. The works were constructed in 1846 to supplement the decline of demand for Batstow iron products. Production continued there until 1867. The glassmaking industry began in the Pinelands in the early 1800s. The industry supported the 19th century population after the decline of the iron furnaces and forges. The glass houses were worked for longtime rural residents with the help of Germans and Belgians who immigrated into the region in the 1830s and 1840s. John Mason invented the mason jar in the Pinelands in 1858. The glass industry declined in the Pinelands in the early 20th century. Pineland farmers began growing cranberries in the 1830s. Both blueberry and cranberry farming are recognized in both the CMP and the national records for preserving, protecting, and enhancing these important historical industries. Cranberries are a native Pineland fruit. In fact, there are only 3 fruits that are native to North America. Does anybody know what the 3 fruits are? Blueberries, cranberries, Concord grape. They're the only fruits that were here. Everything else was imported. Early native people used cranberries as food in ceremonies and medicinally. In the 1960s, the cranberry industry came to a serious roadblock with a public scare of the use of a herbicide called aminotriazole. Bill's going to talk about this later because I think you know a little bit more about this than me. But I wanted to mention we came to a serious roadblock in the 60s. I don't know if anybody remembered this story. But November 9th, 1959, the Secretary of the United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, Arthur S. Fleming, announced that some of the 1959 crop was tainted with traces of the herbicide aminotriazole. The market for cranberries collapsed, and growers lost millions of dollars. In fact, one of our farms in Mays Landing used to be Crescent Properties. That was a cranberry bog until 1960, until this collapsed. And then they planted blueberries. We took that over in 1969. But there was many cranberry growers that didn't recover from this collapse. Yes.
Didn't they go to Washington or fight it?
They
And
did.
my dad did.
They did.
And they won what
They did. It was all, I'm going to continue reading, but it was a false report. However, Ocean Spray recovered by expanding the market for cranberry juice, which was, although widely available for sale before, was not popular. This ensured cranberry growers would not have to rely mostly on Thanksgiving and Christmas for sales, which was the case up until the notorious 1959 crop failure. Most of the New Jersey cranberry growers today give credit to that negative event leading to the Ocean Spray blending the very tart cranberry juice with other fruit juices. That's when they put apple and grape, and they started a real marketing ploy, and they became prosperous. Some of the cranberry growers never came back, but the crop definitely became prosperous. New Jersey currently ranks third in cranberry production in the U.S., with all of New Jersey's commercial production occurring in the Pinelands. Some of the oldest and biggest cranberry operations are the Haynes, Worthington, and Lee families. Do you remember that story, Bill?
Oh, yeah, I can talk to you about it infinite.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'd be a wealth. This is a great story, and I know you were right in the middle of that.
Right.
Okay, Elizabeth White. The Pinelands is the birthplace of the cultivated blueberry. Elizabeth White of Pemberton Township worked with a botanist to cultivate the blueberry at White's Bog in the Pinelands in 1960. That was Dr. Koval. Her efforts resulted in the production of a new crop, as well as the entirely new business of propagating and selling blueberry bushes. Her childhood home, Fenwick Manor, serves as the Pinelands Commission's headquarters. Our executive director is in there with the planning. Next to it is our meeting place, but that building is still in real good shape.
Where is it located?
New Lisbon, right off of 5 Mile Road.
Okay.
Okay. Hamilton is known as the blueberry capital of the world. Hamilton is home to numerous blueberry farms, including the Lang Blueberry Company. I'm not going to go real deep into the blueberry industry because I know Cousin Bobby and Denny were here
Oh, yes.
before. I'm talking a little bit about blueberry and cranberries because they're definitely preserved and protected in the Pinelands eyes. That's one of the industries that we really would like to keep whole. 5 brothers, Duke, Bill, my dad, Ernie, Al, and Anthony Galletta started a Lang Blueberry just after the Depression. The company expanded from only 5 acres to blueberries to 1,300 acres. As time went on, my dad Ernie and his brothers expanded into the largest blueberry farm in the world up until a few years ago. My dad and all my uncles have passed since, but the second generation of myself, cousin Art, Robert, and Al for a long time were the partners. Now Al and Robert have retired, and Robert's 2 sons, Billy and Robbie, have joined partnership with Art and I. We are now ranked in the top 5 in the world for total blueberry production. For years, New Jersey was ranked the 2nd largest producing high bush blueberry area in the U.S. But heavy planting in Georgia, Michigan, Washington State, Oregon, British Columbia, Chile, and Peru, just to name a few, have overtaken New Jersey in total production worldwide. There are other cities and areas that have called themselves also the blueberry capital of the world. For instance, Grand Haven, Michigan, Cherryville, Maine, the British Northwest, Georgia. They actually have bigger areas. But this is why I believe we're, without a doubt, the blueberry capital of the world. None of the areas have the old rich history of blueberry production. We were the first state. This is where they were indigenous. This is where they came from. This was the birthplace of the industry and cultivar just up the road at White's Bog. The immense production in such a condensed area in Hamilton area and the unbiased and unparalleled world-renowned best fresh quality. This is a given. I mean, other areas grow great blueberries, but we have the best tasting fresh quality. Almost all of our product is fresh sold. These other areas are a lot of its processing. But I believe that in 1984, when President Reagan came to Hamilton and proclaimed it the blueberry capital of the world, no other region could insert that moniker like Hamilton. So that's why I call it the blueberry capital. Okay, now I'm preaching to the choir because we're getting into the Hamilton history, and I know this group knows a little bit about this. But again, when I'm up at New Lisbon, I can't tell you how many people from the public, staff, my colleagues, they all love Hamilton. They like the farm, they like the downtown area, they like the history, they like the idea it was all part of the Pinelands. This area is well liked up there. They talk about ananas, they talk about coming for fresh produce, and I meet people from all over up there. So it's well known. I want to talk a little bit about the history, real briefly. Like I said before, we're located 100% in the Pinelands. Hamilton was settled around 1812. It was named after John Hammond Coffin, the son of one of the earliest settlers, William Coffin. The D in Hamilton eventually disappeared to become Hamilton. So his middle name was Hammond, John Hammond, and it was named after his middle name. Winslow Township was named after William Coffin's Sr.'s other son, Edwin Winslow Coffin. Okay, now thriving Eagle Theater was once staged performance in a tent. The tent was replaced by the theater's current building on Vine Street in 1914. Hamilton was a glassmaking town in the 19th century. The W. Skinner and Son Glass Factory opened in 1890 and manufactured cut crystal and other high-end products. Hamilton was once home to shoe and garment factories. Stockton University Cramers Hall was once the site of the National Garment Company. The building was previously the site of the Hamilton Shoe Company. Hamilton has some very interesting neighbors. Sweetwater. The community in Mullica Township derives its name from the sweeter taste of the cedar waters in the Pinelands. Sea captains are said to have visited Sweetwater to gather water before heading to sea because the water would stay fresh longer than water from other areas. Nesco, another community in Mullica Township known for the Indian Cabin Mill Inn, where fugitive Joe Mullinger, the Robin Hood of the Pines, is said to have been captured by authorities there. He was later hanged in Burlington. Folsom was settled in 1845 by German immigrants. It was named after Frances Folsom, the wife of President Grover Cleveland. I didn't know that either. I found this out. You knew that? Okay, that concludes my presentation. I could take questions, but I also left email of myself and the cultural planner. His name is Tony McNichol, on this white paper right next to the computer. And you could either email me, him, or leave your name, email, and a question, and I'll get back to you if I can't answer any of your questions tonight.
I have a question.
Okay, sir, I think you had your hand up first. Sir?
Oh, actually, I don't have a question. My name's Earl Kane. I just have two comments. Joe Mulliner was my uncle. His brother Moses fought in the Revolutionary War. He was a drummer because he was too old to be an infantryman. But Joe was his brother, and so that's one thing. And the other is John Mason. John invented the lid, but my second great grandfather Samuel Crowley made the glass on the Mullica there. It used to be called Crowley Town or Crowleyville. Now it's Crowley's Landing.
Interesting.
Well, I have a question, it's a hot topic, so let you want to touch it. What, do you want to comment on the status of the pipeline that goes through the, nice guy, right?
No, that's okay. The pipeline right now is in appellate division. So, we gave it, first the initial vote was stagnated about 3 or 4 years ago. I think it came to us as a waiver of strict compliance. And we had 7 votes, but remember, the board is 15. One of the commissioners had to recuse himself, and there was 7 for and 7 against. In the Pinelands, when I went up there, the one thing you learn how to do is you learn how to count to 8. Because no vote goes forward, no vote gets denied unless there's 8 votes. Everything else is just moot. It doesn't move either way. That bill stagnated. Later, the executive director decided that we could probably move it with a certificate of filing because it was a private application, and there was a lot of demand to have it at least looked at by the commissioners, and it went to it was the Attorney General decided to remand the decision back to the commissioners. We went back and we had our 9 votes at that time. At this point, they had the permission on both pipelines, the one pipeline going to Beasley Point, which is the Southern Reliable pipeline, and another one which was the natural gas going through Fort Dix, Fort McGuire Super Base. Both pipelines were approved, but neither have put a shovel in the ground because of the impending appeal. I guess I don't know why we haven't had contact. It would be very unethical to have contact with them, why they didn't put a shovel in the ground at this point. We gave them the permission, but we believe that they're afraid that the appeal could have a negative impact on all the development that they would do, and it would be money not well spent. So that's as far as I know. Is that the question you asked?
Yes,
Or?
exactly.
Yes, sir.
Paul, on the Pineland Commission, you're the only farmer. How about these other counties, like Haynes? Why don't one of them get on that, or the other?
We tried. I tried for years to get Steve Lee back. Steve Lee was one of the original commissioners, and he safeguarded the farmers' interests big time. And he was kicked off with Corzine. He was a gubernatorial candidate, so he wasn't a Burlington County rep. And we tried to get him as a Burlington County rep, and he couldn't get senatorial courtesy. So he was blocked by his own senator because some of the environmentalists had enough of Steve Lee at that time. It's a lot of push-pull, and everything we do is under a microscope by all the audience. What I learned is we have a really hard-working, good staff, really good people. And when I first went up there, I have to tell you, I came in with a negative attitude because I was one of the landowners that was affected. And I said, man, what am I getting myself into? But I really found out that they were educated, down to earth. They tried to work with the applicants. They didn't try to hurt anybody. A lot of times it's the people that are looking after everything we do under a microscope that makes things difficult. So we have to really watch what we do, dot our I's, cross our T's, do everything by oil. But we haven't replaced another farmer, and the governor didn't nominate another farmer. We have 2 new ones. I can't pronounce his name. He's the mayor from Woodbine. It's very hard to pronounce, but he's the mayor from Woodbine. And from Camden County, they just appointed an assistant professor from